All right. I assume is there a sign that it's recording? We're good? Okay. So let me close this one moment. Okay. We're good. All right. So let's get started with kind of an overview, broad overview, service animals in Colorado, and I should add, and beyond as well in the United States, what you need to know. So what is a service animal? So it's actually a pretty specific definition, and it's specifically an animal that is trained to perform a specific task or set of tasks for an individual with a disability, including physical, sensory, psychiatric, intellectual, or otherwise. And this is different from emotional support animals, which I'll talk about later, but I feel like the two are often confounded and the terms are used interchangeably. So that's not always the case, or sorry, that's not the case. So this is just a long kind of crowded slide, but what do service animals do? They do a lot. They can help a person with difficulty hearing to particular sounds or dangers. For those who have trouble with their vision, they can help with navigation, helping with various existing medical conditions, like if they have a seizure disorder, if they have diabetes and they struggle with maintaining their blood sugar, helping with physical support, as well as a lot of like emotional health aspects as well. So, and this is just a couple things here. This is a small subset of many. So by far the most common type of service animal is a dog, which I don't think is a huge surprise. So like I mentioned, a lot of different let's call them like functionalities that these service animals can serve, specifically these dogs. They can be hearing dogs, they can be guide dogs, again, seizure response, help with physical mobility, getting around, helping with those with autism, and as well as, again, for those with diabetes and alerting to low blood sugar. And I actually found out, I did not know this, but apparently miniature horses can also be service animals. So it's like 99% dogs, and I guess, I don't actually know the numbers, but I'm guessing it's primarily dogs, and now pretty recently miniature horses. So I did a little pros and cons in case you want to consider getting a dog or a mini horse. So the pros of dogs is obviously they're much smaller. They are more versatile in what the tasks they're able to provide. Obviously dogs are, maybe this is my own bias because I'm a dog person, but I feel like they're a little bit more like lovey and there's more bonding there, but I don't know. And again, as far as getting your animal trained, there's a lot more opportunities for that. The pros of a mini horse is that, interestingly, for those with difficulty with mobility and those with some physical difficulties, because the horses are they're generally stronger and they're well built, they can actually help with mobility a good bit more so than dogs can. They tend to live longer than dogs. They're less social, so the idea is if you're out in public in a big crowded place, dogs, I mean, usually they're trained pretty well, but if they're not, they can go and interact and they can get distracted, and horses tend to not do that as much. There's also less shedding than dogs, apparently. And then kind of the pros and cons kind of switch, right? So the cons of dogs is they don't live as long, there's some physical limitations, and people and owners can have allergies. And the cons of horses, of course, is much more expensive. You need special equipment and special things in your house to have a horse in your house, and the issues with training as well. So the question of, am I eligible for a service animal? So the service animals and the laws surrounding them are controlled by the Americans with Disabilities Act. And in there, they write that it's really anyone with a physiological disorder, just going through cosmetic disfigurement, anatomic loss that affects really any one of your body systems can, in theory, qualify and be eligible for a service animal. The actual process of getting approved for one is kind of multifactorial and involves you, your family, any caretakers, as well as your medical team, and everyone involved in your care, and kind of coming together and figuring out what is the best option for you. So let's say, my doctors, my caregivers, and my family and we all decide, yes, service animal, it's a good thing. I think I would benefit from that. So what are the next steps? So first, you need to actually look into it and figure out what kind of service animal best fits your needs. And I use the term service animal here a little loosely because, again, there's kind of three main categories that I'm going to talk about later. But service dogs, which I started to talk about, emotional support dogs, and therapy dogs. And it's very possible that you might really look into it and realize you might not need this very fully trained service dog, and could actually benefit from an emotional support dog, which is a little bit more like low key, So, all right. So let's say you say yes, service animal. Okay, specifically a service animal. You have to identify and contact a reputable service animal organization. And I listed these are specific. There's the first one's online, but the other ones are located in Colorado. And these are services that can both they train the animal and also get the animal certified as an official service animal. And they just kind of vary based on the extent of the training and how much help they actually offer and things like that. So the next point is training. So it's what's actually interesting is that it's not only the dog itself has to be trained, that's obvious, but actually they want you as the owner you also almost attend these trainings to get trained yourself on how to best work with the service animal and make sure that it's not just like you receive this fully trained animal. It's like it's really this almost like a partnership. So you both learn to work with one another. This is kind of what I'm talking about. So you kind of matching the animal to make sure that it best fits your need and that you really work well together. And then you just need documentation to make sure that it's like all official and well done. So where am I actually able to travel with my service animal? So in the US, any place that allows members of the public to enter must also accept service animals. And there are some exceptions, which in the context of medicine, something that, I personally would think about is like the operating room might not be the best place for a miniature horse, one could argue. Other places of the hospital. So obviously there's exceptions to the rules, but for the most part, by and large, it's really, you are allowed to really go anywhere you would otherwise. And I think this is interesting also because I was learning about this when I was reading about it, was that it's important because I think there's a lot of controversy behind, I think, service animals that I'm going to talk about as well. But you really only staff of like a public setting and people that are kind of might have be kind of asking you questions. They can really only ask you two questions that are very specific. Number one is you asked, is this a service animal required because of a disability? You don't have to disclose what the disability is. They can't ask about what it is or anything. It's simply a yes or no question. Is this a service animal for a disability? And next they can ask, what is the specific task that the dog has been trained to perform? And that's, if you remember, I mentioned on the first slide that a service animal is specifically trained for one or multiple specific tasks. And that's what they're able to ask about. Anything outside of that, they, as far as I understand, legally cannot ask you, and you don't have to disclose. They are not allowed to request any documentation, require that the dog demonstrate its task, or inquire about the nature of a person's disability. I think this is something that's probably the most, I would argue this is the most important slide in this whole presentation, because it's something that I definitely didn't know. And I think maybe even, people in the public whose maybe job it is to make sure that that's, that everything's above board, they might not even know it themselves. So really important to know, to make sure no one's, giving you trouble or anything like that. So with housing, there is a like a lot, there's a section in the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, that essentially promises reasonable accommodation must be made for service animals. Now, it's not really defined very well, so it is a little like loosey-goosey. But technically, however it's interpreted, a reasonable accommodation must be made, and that is even if a no pets rule exists, because technically service animals are not pets. So if you're going like Airbnb or something like that, and they say no pets, like that would not apply technically. Flying, and this is for domestic within the US only, can't guarantee for international. Service animals must be allowed on board without any additional aircraft, without any additional charges, and space must be made for any gear. That said, if you have a particularly disruptive animal, which I don't think is usually the case, you basically, that's grounds to potentially not allow you to. So you have to sign a form that says that you'd be okay with that. So the least fun question in all of this is, how much does all of this cost? It's not a small amount. So there's two parts of this, right? So there's the initial, there's the training and getting everything set. And then there's actually the maintenance and the upkeep of an animal. So training is anywhere from a few hundred to up to 20,000 is where I found it. And again, this is I actually got those numbers from those list of organizations I mentioned earlier. And it varies based on essentially the amount of training they provide you with. So the online only version is, well, first of all, it's online only, so that's already a challenge. And I think it's only a handful of sessions, so that's one of the cheapest ones. But the ones that are the most expensive, up again, $10,000, $20,000. These are very, highly integrated, almost like intense training sessions. It's in person, it's with the animal, and it's very high quality. Many programs have scholarships you can apply for to get costs reduced. They're both program specific, and they're kind of more general, just through the ADA and whatnot. But typically, most insurances do not cover any of these costs. But again, that may vary on your specific plan. And then, like I mentioned, there's the training part, and then there's the maintenance and the upkeep part, right? And that's just like having an animal, right? So I looked it up, like on average, a dog will cost you from $500 to $2,000 a year, just as far as whether it's veterinary visits and shots and all this food, things like that. Many horses, not surprisingly, probably cost even more, but I think I didn't get exact numbers on that. So I kind of wanted to stop, just ask if there's any questions. I know that was like a ton of information. I tried to present it in a way that's kind of like a chronological step-by-step order, the way you would think about these things.
And I do have a question. Do you find anything out about how much it would cost to get an animal that's been already trained, and if there are any programs that can help with like reducing the cost of that
Yeah,
as well?
that's a great question. I did not come across anything like that. I would not be surprised if that exists. Yeah, I don't know. That's good. I can look into that. Maybe send out some more resources at the end of the session. Cool. Anything else?
Oh.
I see another question in the chat that's like,
Oh yeah.
what kind of dogs are typically used as service dogs?
From what I understand, from what I read, it's really any kind of dog. Again, there may be some that are more preferable based on what the specific needs are. So if you need some maybe help with mobility, perhaps a bigger dog would be better, better suited for that. I know just anecdotally that some dogs are known for whether it's their particularly, sense of smell or their hearing or something else. But I didn't see anything about limitations on the actual kinds of, like, the breeds of dogs themselves. All right. Yeah, I can't see the chat, so if there's questions, feel free to just let me know. So,
Something else, sorry,
oh yeah,
Alan, sorry. Something else that I thought about, just because, I don't have a lot of knowledge on this topic, and seems pretty cool, but also like kind of hard to get these kind of services for people that maybe might not be super well off or something like that. Did you come across any information of maybe what kind of insurances are more likely to like um cover these kind of services? Like, do you read anything on whether even Medicaid has ever approved something like that, or is it just private insurances?
yeah. I mean, I didn't read too much about it. I mean, I think for the most part, from what I read, like, most insurances do not. So I don't have specific, like, insurance companies or specific plans in mind. My guess would be that Medicaid would not cover it. So I do agree. This is, again, depending on the level at which you're able to, like, get those training programs. It definitely is limiting. It is financially limiting. Absolutely. So that's why I said it's the dreaded question. It's always the dreaded question.
But I do think there are, like you've mentioned, a lot of these organizations have scholarship programs or other
Yeah,
resources.
right.
They do, a lot of they're typically the ones that are reputable or nonprofits. And so, they have other means to support people as well. I have heard from some of our families, that they've had to kind of coordinate and reach out to several different organizations that train service dogs to find kind of their specific needs for their, for what kinds of support they need to, increase their accessibility out in the world. And this kind of speaks, I think, to a couple of the questions, but I'll let you, Alan, because you've been diving deep into this, answer any of these others that are in the chat as well. But I would say that sort of services that, we have from some of, our patients and families that have service dogs associated with individuals with spina bifida would be, support around sort of mobility or balance, being there in that. If there are other kind of neurologic or other comorbidities that would require some support, guiding, helping with accessing, public transportation, making kind of having one more support as you're kind of navigating out in the world. And I don't know if anyone else has any personal experience or has heard other stories from other families about how they've utilized service dogs, but we certainly are seeing this becoming more prevalent, as people are maybe thinking about doing some time transitioning, out of, if you use a wheelchair for mobility and using a walker, sometimes that can be a helpful option for a dog. Marge, I saw your hand up, but we'll make sure we unmute you if you can't, because I know you have a long history of Spina Bifida organization. You probably have heard some of these resources too. So if you go on the bottom toolbar of the meeting, there's a mute and unmute button.
I got it there.
Okay.
Okay. The Colorado Spina Bifida Association, or the Spina Bifida Association of Colorado now, has scholarships up to $500 that you can just apply to annually. It won't pay the whole thing, but it's certainly a way to get started and make contacts and figure out what you need to do. And they can also help with some assistance in finding a company, or some of the nonprofits that actually have the animals. The Spina Bifida group does not have animals, doesn't train, but they do have the $500, and all you have to do is apply.
Oh, that's very helpful, right? And
Okay.
leveraging those resources as well as some of the resources available through this specific nonprofit as well. I would say, and Alan, this is your, this question around if a family could train, who's a family member who's a breeder and, other who trains, can families get a dog certified outside of the realm of working with the organization that does the training in-house?
Yeah. I mean, I would assume yes. Essentially, I think a part of it too is that those places get like the official documentation as well. I will, but basically, I don't actually know like what the documentation is used for, because like I said, like you can't be asked to provide documentation, so it kind of is like, what are you getting it for, I guess. But that would be the place where it's like if you're doing everything like per, by the book, then you would need to get it certified, and just like a personal trainer might not, qualify. But I don't know.
Yeah, there's such a high threshold for what the expectation is for service animals, which is why they're a different kind of special category that has additional rights out in the world because of their skills and tasks. So again, we'll send out the PowerPoint slide with some of these additional organizations, but when, if you have like an option to identify a dog or do some of the basic training, you could work with those organizations to see at what interval do they need to come to be a part of maybe that more rigorous training that we know have been kind of vetted and will lead to success for the animal.
All right. Well, I can go on.
And then, Alan, there's another question on what sort of services do these dogs can do that apply to Spina Bifida? And I think we did talk about it a little bit. I know that dogs can help a lot with mobility issues and balance issues. But anything else that you can expand on that? Anything else that you came across while you were reading and researching?
I didn't look specifically too much at specifically within Spina Bifida. I think you're right. A lot of the I think mobility is definitely a big one. And I think the other aspect too, of course, and that applies to also the next section, which is emotional service animals, is kind of the emotional health side of things as well, which I don't think is, I think is underrated. So
I've had a couple of people that like they helped with like medication reminder alerts.
Yeah, that's kind of the other thing I was thinking too. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, that's exactly it. Like it's like, less like more about like these are times when we need to take the medication. There's a sort of a process that they can be trained on too. So I think there are a lot of amazing pathways. And I think, part of the evaluation and the qualification for having a service animal is determining what those specific needs would be for each individual. And that's where these like organizations that have, been doing this for, such a long period of time can help you think about what all the possibilities could be so that they can really tailor the training for the service animal to meet your individual needs, which is pretty amazing. And again, they can't all do all the things, but I think working with one of those organizations, talking about what you need, they can help you think through if those are things that could be appropriate for them to help you train the service animal to do. Yeah, Marge.
I have a friend in Kansas that's had several service animals. They get things from the floor that he can't lean out of his chair to get. He has a rope tied to the handle of his refrigerator because he doesn't have the strength to pull it open. And the dog can get some things, they have it set up, but he can usually do that type of thing. So there's all sorts of strange things that are so helpful for people with spina bifida and other disabilities that these animals can be trained to do. So you just have to find, Rebecca, what what the things are that you need, and they usually will train the dog to do that for you if possible. So good luck with that. Okay, guess it should work.
And I think it's a good point too, because, as if you recall, the first step is, researching what animal best fits your need. And it's very possible that, if you're don't fly too much, you don't foresee yourself needing to bring the animal into like restaurants and public spaces, like maybe you don't need, like a licensed service animal, but instead just a well-trained dog that not anyone, but like you said, Cindy, like someone not through an official organization can do, and that would be much easier and still, be effective and much cheaper, probably. So, all right. So emotional support animals and therapy animals. So, as a little reminder, the rights of service animals are protected by the ADA, and that's what gives them all the freedoms that I mentioned earlier. So emotional support animals and therapy animals are not considered service animals, and they do not have the same protections. So the definition of an emotional support animal and how it differs from service is that it is any animal, so any animal that you want, not just dog or mini horse, that provides emotional support, alleviating one or more symptoms of a person's disability. And this can be providing companionship, relieving loneliness, depression, anxiety, kind of all these things that people struggle with. It can be trained for a specific owner, but not a specific task, which is kind of the theme of this talk, which is that specific task it's trained for is what differentiates a service animal from anything else. To be considered an emotional support animal, it must be prescribed by a mental health professional. However, I'm going to talk about this. It's not always how it's done. So where can I bring, this is kind of just an overview, like where can I bring my animal? And it compares emotional support animal, service animal, or just a pet. So college, university, housing, yes, not for pet. If there's a no pet policy, an emotional support animal also qualifies because technically, again, on paper, they're not considered pets. They're considered, well, they're emotional support animals. But a restaurant and airplane, these are a little bit more specific. And again, these are some of those freedoms that the ADA grants to service animals, but not necessarily for other ones. Okay. So I'm sure it's not, I mean, I've heard plenty about this, and there's a lot of controversies about emotional support animals and people really abusing the system that's meant to help people. So this is just a quick article I read where people are just calling any animal an emotional support animal. There's no documentation, there's no nothing, and they're just really taking advantage of it. This is from an article. Let me see if I can find a part that I want to read. Critics say that pet owners are obtaining phony certifications or letters from online therapists to avoid paying fees to get permission to bring creatures they wouldn't, or to bring creatures where they wouldn't normally be allowed. So on the plane, we've seen everything from reptiles to insects. And, again, I think this is a good summary, which is like you want to accommodate people with real requests, but it's really hard to do that when there's so many fake ones. And it's really difficult. And this is a picture of a emotional support. I don't know if it's an alligator or a crocodile, never one of the difference between the two, but it's a reptile of some sort. So I kind of bring this up because, again, if we're going, we're talking about this and how to get one, I think it's important to understand, the climate behind it, and that there's a lot of people taking advantage of the system. And unfortunately, again, I mentioned those two questions that someone can ask you about a service animal, like, On paper, yes, but I'm sure because of all this stuff going on, there might be some more heightened sensitivity to it, and it might be a little bit more difficult. So it's unfortunate, but I just wanted to bring it up so so you're aware. So lastly, I'll talk about therapy dogs. And therapy dogs, you might have seen them walking around Children's. They always make my day when I'm there. I think it's one of the best parts about Children's. I'm at Denver Health right now, and we just had our therapy dog walk by today, and it was awesome. So therapy dogs are essentially, they volunteer. They are like canine volunteers in clinical settings. This can be in hospitals and schools and nursing homes, and they're really just there to like make your day better. They are trained, so they're not just like some random dog you pick up, but like they are trained to be in new environments. They're meant to be very social and very nice, and be nice and cool and calm around other people, and just enjoy the attention. So where can I get more information? This is the U.S. Service Animals website is here. The Americans with Disability Act website is right here. American Kennel Club is one that I found that really I got a lot of good information just reading about it. And there's plenty more. I'm not, by no means, I'm not an expert on this. Just did some deep dive Googling and researching. So that's, this is all public information, easy to access. And yeah, that's all I have. As always, I will make endless pitches and requests that if you like it, if you didn't like it, let us know. You can, fill out the survey that we send, because that's like super important for us, and that's how we get our topic recommendations. Just shoot a direct email if you want, be like, hey, what's up? That I enjoyed that. What about next time? So and so topic. We're always very open to hearing feedback and recommendations. So yeah.
Great, Alan. Thank you so much for this information. If you want to stop recording, we can see if there's other related to either service animals, emotional support animals, or therapy animals. I don't know if anybody else has any other experience with this, either personally or with
I
others.
figure out how to stop recording, and I can't figure it out. I hid my channel. I'll figure it out, but I'm working on it.
You can always crop this part of the video too. So